Chapter 14. The Americans. Land of religious freedom? Both governments and religions were growing like mushrooms, and some lasted about as long. Religions wanted control over governments, and governments tried to get control over religions. Unfortunately, God usually had little to do with either. Their laws and the laws of God were frequently in conflict. A few souls attempted to get out from under such secular and ecclesiastical bondage, and sought for a new land and new freedom. They call the new country America a place where good men and women could accept God's laws as their laws. It seemed to be his desire also, for later he said, "For verily I say unto you, my law shall be kept on this land." D&C 58:19, men who loved freedom and good government were selected to write those laws into a constitution, as God explained. And for this purpose have I established the constitution of this land, by the hands of wise men whom I raised up unto this very purpose. D&C 10180. Government organization usually reflects the personality of its people. The citizens of a nation seldom get a better or worse government than they deserve. The political architects of this country knew what they were doing. As the Mayflower Pilgrims had written that their great hope and inward zeal is for the propagating and advancing the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in these remote parts of the world. Christian History of the Constitution, Verna Hall, PVE. The primary reason most people started coming to America was because they finally heard of a nation that had religious liberty. That term was best described by Henry Campbell Black, who wrote the famous Black's Law Dictionary, which, after more than a century, is still being used. He defined religious liberty as freedom from dictation, constraint, or control in matters affecting the conscience, religious beliefs, and the practice of religion, freedom to entertain and express any or no system of religious opinions, and to engage in or refrain from any form of religious observance. Page 723. The customs, traditions, and personal beliefs regarding marriage are an important part of one's religion, and the U.S. Constitution offered its citizens those rights, leaving the conscience of a man untrammeled as long as he injured no one. He was free to marry one wife, several wives, or no wife at all. But this idea was short-lived even in America. Men who entered into public office were soon tempted with power, position, and wealth, and America began to be more and more like other nations. Laws, privileges, and rights were changed and became more restrictive. The Constitution said one thing and the politicians something else, and, for that matter, they still do. Conflicts arose between religion and civil government because government was in violation of the Establishment of Religion Clause, fostering excessive entanglement between government and religion. Justice Black once delivered a decision, Everson v. Board of Education, in which he clearly explained. The Establishment of Religion Clause of the First Amendment means at least this: neither a state nor the federal government can set up a church. Neither can pass laws which aid one religion, aid all religions, or prefer one religion over another. Neither can force nor influence a person to go to or to remain away from church against his will, or force him to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion. No person can be punished for entertaining or professing religious beliefs or disbeliefs, for church attendance or non-attendance. In the words of Jefferson, the clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect a wall of separation between church and state. Constitutional Law, Freund, Sutherland, Howe, Brown, page 1351. Justice Black referred to other major decisions relating to the protection of a religion and its members. The First Amendment has erected a wall between church and state. That wall must be kept high and impregnable. We could not approve the slightest breach. That amendment requires the state to be neutral in its relations with groups of religious believers and non-believers. It does not require the state to be their adversary. State power is no more to be used so as to handicap religions than it is to favor them. Neither so high nor so impregnable today as yesterday is the wall raised between church and state by Virginia's great statute of religious freedom and the First Amendment, now made applicable to all the states by the 14th. There is not a shadow of right in the general government to intermeddle with religion, and that this subject is, for the honor of America, perfectly free and unshackled. The government has no jurisdiction over it. Madison opposed every form and degree of official relation between religion and civil authority. For him, religion was a wholly private matter beyond the scope of civil power, either to restrain or to support. Denial or abridgment of religious freedom was a violation of rights both of conscience and of natural equality. In recent years, the doctrine of Watson v. Jones has been given constitutional status, so that it now seems that the states and nation are compelled to respect not merely the religious liberty of natural persons, but to secure the liberty of churches, domestic and foreign, to govern themselves without interference by American secular authority, whether legislative or judicial. Seek Edroff v. St. Nicholas Cathedral, 344 U.S. 94, 1952. But our concern is not with the wisdom of legislation, but with its constitutional limitation. If the purpose or effect of a law is to impede the observance of one or all religions or is to discriminate invidiously between religions, that law is constitutionally invalid, even though the burden may be characterized as being only indirect. Braunfeld v. Brown, U.S. at 607. The test may be stated as follows. What are the purpose and primary effect of the enactment? If either is the advancement or inhibition of religion, then the enactment exceeds the scope of legislative power as circumscribed by the Constitution. That is to say that to withstand the strictures of the Establishment Clause, there must be a secular legislative purpose and a primary effect that neither advances nor inhibits religion. Everson v. Board of Education, Supra, McGowan v. Maryland, U.S. 420-442, 1961. The Free Exercise Clause, likewise considered many times here, withdraws from legislative power, state and federal, the exertion of any restraint on the free exercise of religion. Its purpose is to secure religious liberty in the individual by prohibiting any invasions thereof by civil authority. Further, it is no defense to urge that the religious practices here may be relatively minor encroachments on the First Amendment. The breach of neutrality that is today a trickling stream may all too soon become a raging torrent, and, in the words of Madison, it is proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. Memorial and Remonstrance Against Religious Assessments, quoted in Everson, Supra at 65. The antecedents of today's decision are many and unmistakable. They are rooted in the foundation soil of our nation. They are fundamental to freedom. Government in our democracy, state and national, must be neutral in matters of religious theory, doctrine, and practice. It may not be hostile to any religion or to the advocacy of no religion, and it may not aid, foster, or promote one religion or religious theory against another, or even against the militant opposite. The First Amendment mandates governmental neutrality between religion and between religion and non-religion. The place of religion in our society is an exalted one, achieved through a long tradition of reliance on the home, the church, and the inviolable citadel of the individual heart and mind. We have come to recognize through bitter experience that it is not within the power of government to invade that citadel, whether its purpose or effect be to aid or oppose, to advance or retard. In the relationship between man and religion, the state is firmly committed to a position of neutrality. Though the application of that rule requires interpretation of a delicate sort, the rule itself is clearly and concisely stated in the words of the First Amendment. Ibid. See pages 1351-1354. An outstanding feature of the Constitution was that it limited the power of the federal government, rather than of its citizens. The Constitution was to serve as a leash upon its politicians, but unfortunately there were still enough loopholes for political rats to crawl through and destroy the American dream. That such freedom means also freedom to make disastrous experiments only drives home again that no country can ever be a government of laws and not of men, but only a government partly of laws, around which ill-chosen men will build ill practices or well-chosen men build wise ones. National Encyclopedia 3240. So under this protective umbrella of the Constitution supposedly assuring separation of church and state, the gospel of Jesus Christ was restored to Joseph Smith. The Mormons, more than any other people, had reason to support, defend, and promote the Constitution. It offered them the greatest protection for religious beliefs and practices. The prophet Joseph loved this heavenly banner. Hence we say that the Constitution of the United States is a glorious standard. It is founded in the wisdom of God. It is a heavenly banner. It is to all those who are privileged with the sweets of liberty, like the cooling shades and refreshing waters of a great rock in a thirsty and weary land. It is like a great tree under whose branches men from every clime can be shielded from the burning rays of the sun. TPJS, page 147. As broad as the Constitution was, and as much as the greatest minds of the nation put into it, Joseph Smith noticed a weakness, which over the passage of time has proved to be very prophetic. It is one of the first principles of my life, and one that I have cultivated from my childhood, having been taught it by my father, to allow everyone the liberty of conscience. I am the greatest advocate of the Constitution of the United States there is on the earth. In my feelings I am always ready to die for the protection of the weak and oppressed in their just rights. The only fault I find with the Constitution is, it is not broad enough to cover the whole ground. Although it provides that all men shall enjoy religious freedom, yet it does not provide the manner by which that freedom can be preserved, nor for the punishment of government officers who refuse to protect the people in their religious rights, or punish those mobs, states, or communities who interfere with the rights of the people on account of their religion. Its sentiments are good, but it provides no means of enforcing them. It has but this one fault. Under its provision, a man or a people who are able to protect themselves can get along well enough, but those who have the misfortune to be weak or unpopular are left to the merciless rage of popular fury. TPJS, pages 326-27. In 1788, when several state conventions were ratifying the U.S. Constitution, they decided to more clearly identify the rights offered to its citizens, resulting in what is now referred to as the Bill of Rights. The very first of these 10 amendments states, Article 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assembly, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Based on the strength of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, Joseph Smith and his followers incorporated an article in their belief structure that stated, "We believe in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law." Article of Faith number 12. The question has been asked many times since then, what law? The Lord himself answered, "And that law of the land which is constitutional, supporting that principle of freedom and maintaining rights and privileges, belongs to all mankind, and is justifiable before me. Therefore, I, the Lord, justify you, and your brethren of my church, in befriending that law which is the constitutional law of the land. And as pertaining to law of man, whatsoever is more or less than this, cometh of evil. I, the Lord God, make you free, therefore ye are free indeed, and the law also maketh you free." D&C 98 5-8. In another article of faith, it was worded even more emphatically. We claim, not merely believe, the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience, and allow all men the same privilege, let them worship how, where, or what they may. Article of Faith number 11. This was the same principle the Constitution advocated, so whatsoever is more or less than this, cometh of evil. The Supreme Court was instituted to enforce these individual constitutional rights, and should be supported by federal, state and local law officials. One of their rulings explained this. Certain aspects of religious exercise cannot, in any way, be restricted or burdened by either federal or state legislation. Compulsion by law of the acceptance of any creed or the practice of any form of worship is strictly forbidden. The freedom to hold religious beliefs and opinions is absolute. Canwell v. Connecticut, 310 U.S. 296, 303. Other legal sources also emphasize the fact that governments cannot control or force a change in anyone's religion. The constitutional limitations have a dual aspect. They prevent the legal compulsion to accept any creed or the practice of any form of worship on one hand, and, on the other hand, permit the free exercise of a chosen form of religion. The freedom of religion protected against federal legislation by the First Amendment of the Federal Constitution is also protected against invasion by state action by reason of the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause, 6. What is freedom of religion? It embraces the right to maintain theories of life, of death, and of the hereafter which are rank heresy to followers of the orthodox faiths. 7. It allows everyone under the jurisdiction of the United States to entertain such notions respecting his relations to his Maker, and the duties they impose as may be approved by his judgment and conscience, and to exhibit his sentiments in such form of worship as he may think proper, not injurious to the equal rights of others. American Law and Procedure, LaSalle Extension University, 1290 ed. In other words, the government cannot tell a person what to believe or what religious beliefs to practice. What good is a religion if you are permitted to just believe in it? Is there any value in believing the 10 Commandments without practicing them? George Washington understood the important role of religion and morality within a nation. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness. Stand fast by our Constitution. J. Reuben Clark, page 27. But great speeches and noble thoughts of American patriots were soon in conflict with new and improved state and federal laws, especially those concerning religious freedom. Men in government proved traitors to their oath of office. The prophet Joseph noticed this and advised the saints. The different states, and even Congress itself, have passed many laws diametrically contrary to the Constitution of the United States. Shall we be such fools as to be governed by its laws, which are unconstitutional? No. DHC 5289. The Latter-day Saints were among the first American citizens to learn from experience of such two-faced hypocrisy. They became more and more unpopular, their freedoms could not be preserved, unjust government officers were not punished, nor were mobs in states who deprived the Mormons of their constitutional rights. The corrupt government was more merciless than the vicious mobs. The saints had no appeal within the government, since officials on all levels were equally guilty. Government should exist to protect its citizens, showing no discrimination because of race, politics, or religion. As a public servant, it should offer service without special favors for certain people. In other words, a policeman protects a Catholic, not because he is a Catholic, but because he is a citizen. A fireman protects a church, not because it is Protestant, but because it is a part of society. Public servants are in office to protect Catholics, Jews, Protestants, and Mormons, without asking them. Are you identified with a particular religion, or are you incorporated with the government? A state may not adopt programs or practices which aid or oppose any religion. Abington School District 374 U.S. at 225. Also, a state has no legitimate interest in protecting any or all religions from views distasteful to them. Justice Clark and Burstein v. Wilson, 343 U.S. 1952. When a government turns from protecting religions to invading or persecuting them, it is turned from being a public servant to a public menace. When a government tries to dictate and control the beliefs and practices of a religion, it is assumed the power of a god. But such powers, decisions, and rights are not intended to be invested with Caesar. They are still and always will be invested with God the Father, who has his own plan to be carried out among the righteous saints, as Erastus Snow stated. Now, when the Lord raised up the prophet Joseph to lay the foundation of this church, he found monogamy instead of polygamy to be the rule of Christendom, and he enjoined, in the early revelations to this church, that every woman cleave unto her husband, and that every man cleave unto his wife and none else. Saying that he that looketh upon a woman to lust after her who is not his wife hath committed adultery already with her in his heart. This was the law governing Christendom, which had been inherited by the Gentiles for ages past, and introduced among the Roman Empire, and perpetuated by the Roman Church, and the Protestant churches that had sprung out of her, and the Lord in the early history of this people continued this order of things, but revealed unto the prophet Joseph, nevertheless, that the time would come when he would require his people to enter into plural marriage, as he did Abraham and the prophets of old, to bring about his purposes in the latter days. Joseph revealed this unto some of the first elders of the church, taking care to enjoin them that they must preserve these things in their own hearts, that the time had not yet come when the Lord required his people to enter into this order, but the time would come when he would require them to do so. This was made manifest in the early stages of this church, but not until 1843 was this law committed to writing and given to the people. This revelation we find in the Book of Doctrine and Covenants. Erastus Snow, J.D. 24 164-65. So here in America, too, there began to be a distinct difference between the marriage laws of God and those of man. Legally, the rights and type of marriage should be a matter of personal preference, religious, civil, or by private contract. However, shortly after the Constitution was ratified, some states began to establish marriage laws limiting these individual rights. Among those states were 5 in which Joseph Smith lived: Vermont, New York, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois. The laws restricting polygamy in each of these states are briefly presented here. Vermont passed the following law of 1797, which was a civil law against any persons who wanted to live plural marriage. Sec. 23. And it is hereby further enacted, that if any person or persons in the state being married, or who shall hereafter marry, shall, at any time, marry any other person, the former husband or wife being alive, or shall continue to live together so married, every such offender being thereof convicted before the Supreme Court of Judicature, shall be punished as in case of adultery. And every person so offending may be tried in the county in which he or she shall be apprehended. Statutes of Vermont R. 1797, page 165. This law was in force at the time Joseph Smith was born, December 23, 1805, in Sharon, Windsor County, Vermont. It seemed that the devil knew what Joseph would do and was setting up his barriers among the laws of men. The influence and traditions of the Holy Roman Empire were already making their appearance in America. In 1815, Joseph Smith's family moved to Wayne County, New York. A state law had already been established there on February 7, 1788, against certain types of marriage. It was revised and clarified in 1813, 2 years before Joseph and his family arrived there. It reads, Chap. XXIV. An act to restrain all persons from marrying until their former wives and former husbands be dead, passed 7th February, 1788. Be it enacted by the people of the state of New York, represented in Senate and Assembly, and it is hereby enacted by the authority of the same, that if any person or persons being married, or who hereafter shall marry, do at any time marry any person or persons, the former husband or wife being alive, then every such offense shall be felony. Laws of the State of New York, revised and passed at the 36th session of the Legislature, 1813, pages 113 to 114. Joseph Smith arrived in Kirtland, Ohio, in early 1831. Here he was met by another state law on the marriage issue, passed just 7 years previously. It stated, Sec. 7, that if any married person, having a husband or wife living, shall marry any other person, every person so offending shall be deemed guilty of a high misdemeanor, and upon conviction thereof, shall be imprisoned in the penitentiary, and kept at hard labor, not exceeding 7 nor less than 3 years. First session of the 22nd General Assembly of the State of Ohio, begun and held in the town of Columbus, December 1, 1823. Vol. XXII. An Act for the Punishment of Crimes. Sec. 7 Bigamy. In the middle of July 1831, Joseph Smith and a few of his companions went to Jackson County, Missouri, where the following statute was already in force. Sec. 76. Be it further enacted, that if any person or persons, within the state, being married, or who shall hereafter marry, do at any time marry any person or persons, the former husband or wife being alive, upon conviction thereof, here they shall be whipped, not exceeding 39 stripes, be fined in not less than $100, nor more than $500, and imprisoned not less than 6 nor more than 12 months, and thereafter be rendered infamous, be incapable of giving testimony, or holding any office, civil or military, within this state. Laws of the State of Missouri. Revised and digested by authority of the General Assembly, 1825, pages 305 to 306. When the Saints were driven from Missouri to Illinois, they were at first welcomed and treated fairly by the local citizens. However, they found an anti-polygamy law in that state as well. Sec. 121. Bigamy consists in the having of 2 wives or 2 husbands at one and the same time, knowing that the former husband or wife is still alive. If any person or persons within the state, being married, or who shall hereafter marry, do at any time marry any person or persons within the state, being married, or who shall hereafter marry, do at any time marry any person or persons, the former husband or wife being alive, the person so offending shall, on conviction thereof, be punished by a fine not exceeding $1,000, and imprisoned in the penitentiary not exceeding 2 years. Revised Laws of Illinois, 1833, pages 198 to 199. Thus, the 5 states where Joseph Smith resided all had laws against plural marriage. These state laws were made after the creation and ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in conflict with guaranteed rights, and also in opposition to the marriage practices of the ancient prophets and patriarchs of God. Joseph Smith was well aware of the laws of the land, and could see that they were in conflict with the laws of God. His teachings and conduct proved which laws he considered to be the most important.